Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy. Thanks for joining us today, September 1st, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, as always, we have a great number of feasts. To start us off, though, I would just mention that the first Sunday of September, they celebrate La Virgen de la Cinta. In Catalan, it's Mare de Déu Verge de la Cinta. That celebrates, actually, it's an interesting image that, let me pull it up right here, I have it up, that celebrates, apparently goes back to a tradition that Our Lady appeared in the 17th century to a man who made shoes, who passed out on his way towards another nearby town. Our Lady then offered him the belt with which she, the cincture that she had around her waist, in order to calm his pains. So that's interesting when they call her Our Lady of the belt. But getting more specifically here to September 1st, it was on September 1st, 1883, that Pope Leo XIII issued the first of his many encyclicals on the Rosary. This encyclical was entitled Supreme Apostolatus Officio, and like I said, it issued today in 1883. Likewise, we also celebrate today the dedication of the elevation of the Cathedral of the Assumption. That's in, you may not have guessed it, in Baltimore, Maryland, right? Our source tells us that although Maryland is named for King Charles I's queen, Henrietta Maria, and not for Mary, the state of Maryland was in fact founded by English Catholics seeking freedom to practice and spread their faith. So it's interesting because that state in particular is home to many important sites for the history of Catholicism and Marian devotion in the U.S. It's also the seat of the first Catholic diocese in the United States, Baltimore. And Baltimore's first cathedral was built under the guidance of Bishop John Carroll, President Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Latrobe, who was the architect of the Capitol, right? And named for the feast day on which Carroll became a bishop in 1790, which would have been, you guessed it, the Assumption. They laid the cornerstone on July 7th, 1806. However, the magnificent structure was not dedicated until two major wars and 70 years later. It was on September 1st, 1937, that Pope Pius XI gave the Cathedral of the Assumption the rank of minor basilica. When the new Baltimore Cathedral was dedicated to Mary Our Queen in 1959, this Basilica of the Assumption became co-cathedral. It closed for extensive renovations recently in 2004. It reopened in 2006 in new beauty and splendor. Next up, we have two other celebrations in Italy. They celebrate Madonna della Quercia in Bettola in Piacenza. This is an interesting one. There's not a lot known about it. Apparently, between 1496 and 1497, news spread about an appearance of the Blessed Virgin to a little shepherd girl, right? So many people started coming to this site in Piacenza, and they decided to build a church. At some point, Pope St. John XXIII proclaimed Our Lady of the Quercia as the heavenly patroness of the entire valley of Nur, right? Back in the day, there was nothing, and now there's a huge shrine there. What is the connection between September 1st? I really don't know, but it may be that is when John the 23rd declared her the patroness of that place. Likewise, another interesting devotion that is sometimes attributed to, placed on the date of September 1st is Porta Paradisi, the Gate of Heaven, in Asti. And this is actually a very beautiful image that's painted on the front of the Basilica of St. Mark. And it was painted there in 1526 in memory of the miraculous liberation of the city from the soldiers of Maramaldo. I don't know who that is, and don't know, maybe he's got another English name. The original sanctuary was built they built this was the gate of the door, and then it was, had an image of Our Lady. So then the church built up around it. And now there's a very large church that was begun in 1900. Again, I couldn't find anything that really linked it to September 1st, but we are told that a historic moment was when Pope St. John Paul II visited on September 21st in 1993. So what else are we celebrating today in the Marian world? Many different things. We have Notre Dame de la Sève in Provence. In Provence, France, a vow was made during a pilgrimage to Our Lady that took place in 1630. The painting of Madonna della Rosa in Ostra, in Ancona, in La Marche, in Italy, was crowned in 1726. It's also the feast of Our Lady Most Holy of Graces in Minturno, in Latina, Latium. That's close to where I live. And likewise, it's also the celebration of La Virgen de las Cruces in Damiel, Ciudad Real, in Castilla-La Mancha, in Spain. This is the patronal feast, which commemorates the end of the 1885 cholera epidemic. And so that's what we're celebrating today in the Marian world on September 1st. So for today's Marian meditation, we're actually going to start reading another book. This is a classic. It's entitled True Devotion to Mary, with Preparation for Total Consecration, by Saint Louis de Montfort. Saint Louis de Montfort, right? It notes here, at least the version that I'm reading from, it's translated from the original French by Father Frederick Faber, who also is famous in his own right. So just to give us a little introduction here, this is at the beginning of the book, we have the citations of popes who give their commendations of this text. So we begin with Blessed Pius IX, who declared that St. Louis de Montfort's devotion to Mary was the best and most acceptable form of devotion to Our Lady. Right? Likewise, Pope St. Pius X said, and this is a quote, "I heartily recommend true devotion to the Blessed Virgin, so admirably written by St. de Montfort, and to all who read it, I grant the apostolic benediction." And he adds too, "There is no surer or easier way than Mary in uniting all men with Christ." Likewise, Pope Pius XI, "I have practiced this devotion since my youth." Pope Pius XII, "God alone was everything to de Montfort. Remain faithful to this precious heritage, which this great saint left you. It is a glorious inheritance, worthy that you continue to sacrifice your strength and your life as you have done until today." Right? Then we also have Pope St. Paul VI. "We are convinced without any doubt that devotion to Our Lady is essentially joined with devotion to Christ, that it assures a firmness of conviction to faith in Him and His Church, a vital adherence to Him and to His Church, which, without devotion to Mary, would be impoverished and compromised." And then we can end with a quote from St. John Paul II, and this is what he had to say about this book, right? "The reading of this book," again, we're talking about True Devotion to Mary by Louis de Montfort, "was a decisive turning point in my life." I say turning point, but in fact it was a long inner journey. "This perfect devotion is indispensable to anyone who means to give himself without reserve to Christ and to the work of redemption." And then elsewhere he says, "It is from de Montfort that I have taken my motto, totus tuus, I am all yours. Someday I'll have to tell you Montfortians how I discovered de Montfort's treatise on the true devotion to Mary, and how often I had to reread it to understand it." Again, so these are all comments of the popes regarding this book, True Devotion to Mary, by St. Louis de Montfort, which will be our next reading, our next set of meditations.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.